Good morning and welcome. I'm pleased to see everyone here for today's Distinguished Guest Lecture Series with Dr. Sandra Morgan. Before Greg introduces our speaker today, I would like to have us congratulate Greg on his birthday today. We wish him the best and another full year of wonderful memories and good life. So thank you for indulging me in that special little treat this morning, and I will hand it back over to Greg.
Thank you, Dan. I've not got much sleep last night, not because it's my birthday and I've been out, partying. I've been getting ready for a flight. As soon as the class is over, I'm racing up to LAX to fly to Europe for spring break. So I don't know what you're doing for your spring break. You know we don't have class next week, don't you? We have a 2-week break, right? And you have 2 weeks. We get 10 days off, but we're not meeting for 2 weeks here. And when we come back, there'll be a gentleman by the name of Don Barkley, who's leading a panel discussion on religion. He's going to have leaders from Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity in a panel conversation talking about, do all the religious believe in the same God? Which I think is going to be a pretty interesting topic. And come, to learn something about religion, so that'll be fun. I am, this is just a great day for me. I'm 58 years old today. I've never married, and tomorrow I'm proposing to an Italian girl that I've known for 30 years who's also never married. So I got to say, I'm excited. I have no sleep. I'm kind of going on adrenaline, but so if I say the wrong thing right now, you'll understand. It's my birthday. You got to forgive me. What's that? If she doesn't say yes, I've spent a lot of money for absolutely nothing. I got a flight. I'm on adrenaline right now. We today, though, having said all that, first of all, we're so happy that you come every week. Welcome to this class. I hope you're liking this. We're halfway through the semester, and we've had some excellent speakers. We have some excellent speakers to come. And I hope you're benefiting. I love being here. I love sitting, listening. I've heard people talk about things I've never thought about before. Puerto Rico annexation. I just haven't thought about that. Supreme Court. Just aging. It's just a great time. By the way, you saw on the schedule I was supposed to speak today a long time ago, and what happened is I spoke in January. If you weren't here for the first class, someone didn't show up, and I spoke there. I've had several people ask me, I thought I was supposed to speak today, so just know that I may come back up here again sometime in the future, but for now, we have another speaker here today. Dr. Sandra Morgan is a real treat. We've got someone very special, comes from Vanguard University. Let me just read the introduction about her. Dr. Sandra Morgan is recognized globally for her expertise on combating human trafficking and working to end violence against women. She began her anti-trafficking work in Athens, Greece, where she served on the board of the Athens International Nurses Association. She has also served as the administrator of the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force before returning full-time to Vanguard University in order to extend global impact and build capacity for research, education, and advocacy directly related to exploitation of women and children. She served on former Foreign Affairs Chair Congressman Ed Royce's Anti-Human Trafficking Advisory Committee. She partners with the Ministry of Higher Education in Baghdad, Iraq, to build capacity for women in higher education leadership. She hosts the nationally acclaimed Ending Human Trafficking podcast, which is recognized by the National Clearinghouse on Family and Youth, Department of Health and Human Services as a great way to get up to speed on human trafficking. So you can go after today, you can go look it up on your phone and get a podcast, Ending Human Trafficking, and I'm just looking forward to catching up on that myself. As director of Vanguard University's Global Center for Women in Justice, she oversees the Women in Justice minor, as well as teaching family violence and human trafficking. She launched a 12-unit anti-human trafficking online certificate program in 2016 to prepare professionals who are already on the front line and to prepare students with best practice principles and knowledge. Let's give a warm welcome for Dr. Sandra Morgan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So I'm excited to be here today. And so this is a big screen. I feel, wow. And that is a really bright light. Let me just introduce you to my husband, Gene Morgan. And we've actually driven around here. We keep thinking, when we want to downsize, is this a good place to live? Yeah? Okay, great. So I thought we'd start off with a game. You guys like games? You guys recognize what this game is? The Price is Right. The Price is Right. And so I have a few items I'd like you to guess the price on. I'm not going to make you run down here, but how much do you think this mobile phone costs? Just shout it out. I like a rowdy class. 100? 900? Who said 500? Okay. Anybody want to go any different? Okay. Now let's see the price and see who came the closest without going over. $549. Okay. So who got it exactly right? Who said 550? Because like you go over by $1, you learn never do a round number, right? Okay. How about this game? How many of you bought Christmas presents for your grandkids? Yeah. So how much does this cost? $60. I hear 25. I hear 60. I hear 59. He's getting smarter. $14.99. 50? $85? Okay. $89.99. Good job. Good job. How about this 2014 Lamborghini? How many of you have one of these in your driveway? If you already have one, you can't bid. Okay. Okay, how much is it? 100? 195, 900? 75,000? 375. 2014. 250. Okay, let's see. 199, 800. Who got closest? All right, good job. Well, here's the thing. There are a lot of myths out there about human trafficking, but one of the things that I want us to think about right at the beginning is that people are not for sale. People are not supposed to be sold. Human trafficking is called human trafficking because we use the same terminology for trafficking drugs, for trafficking weapons. When people are making a profit doing something that isn't supposed to be done, doing something that where they're selling products that bring harm. And so there are a lot of myths. One of the myths is that human trafficking is only sex trafficking. How many of you have seen a Law and Order or a documentary about human trafficking? Almost everybody in the room. How many of you know that labor trafficking is 3 times as prevalent as sex trafficking? Because the documentaries, over 90%, are about sex trafficking. And there are 2 kinds of trafficking. Also, it's a myth that victims are out there looking to be rescued, and if you could find them, they're going to be jumping up and down saying, help me, so they'll be easy to identify. Actually, we have to learn to look beneath the surface, and I'll explain the mental aspects of manipulation and coercion. If we go a little further, we also hear the myth that it's not happening in our community. And boy, by the time the quiz at the end of this lecture, you should be able to answer that with the truth. And human trafficking happens everywhere. Pardon? Increase my volume.
It's okay.
You got it? Okay. Am I loud enough now? Yeah, okay. Ooh, this is good. I need this in my classroom. Okay, so it does happen in Orange County, and the implications about who it impacts are really very, very broad. So we'll talk about that as well right here in Orange County. Human trafficking is a global phenomenon that is fueled by poverty and gender discrimination. More victims are female. Children are more than a quarter of victims, closer to a third of victims. And when they turn 18, they don't suddenly walk away and say, well, now I'm legal age. I don't have to do this anymore, because of the coercion and the manipulation. The legal definition of human trafficking can be kind of simplified into 3 categories. If you have one thing from each category, you have the elements of human trafficking that will make it feasible for you to prosecute the trafficker and identify the victim and receive services. So there's an action, a means, and a purpose. So if someone recruited, harbored, transported, provided, or obtained someone in order to use them, I'm going to use my great clicker here, for a commercial sex act or labor or services. So a commercial sex act is more than just prostitution. It can be for filming pornography, for dancing in clubs, for strip clubs, all of those kinds of things. It can be phone sex. And they use the means of force, fraud, or coercion. So it has one element. You don't have to use all of them, but at least one element. You learned that I started fighting human trafficking when I was living in Athens, Greece. And so I'll tell you a story from many years ago, but the elements, you're going to identify them here, are the way that we determine if it is a human trafficking case. Because someone has to be being sold. When we talk about the sex purchaser, there is a profit motive. It's the law of supply and demand. So I'll tell you Maria's story. She was in the Doctors of the World shelter where I was volunteering. She had been recruited when she was 17 from Ukraine. She had graduated at the top of her class, but there were no jobs. Her father had died in the Chechenian conflict at that time, and her mother and 8-year-old brother were counting on Maria to become the breadwinner. There were no jobs. There were no young men to get married and have a husband to support you. So she and her friend were looking in the ads and found an opportunity to go to the big city and be interviewed for jobs in Greece. They stood in line with dozens of other girls. They filled out a job application. It didn't smear because it was printed last night on an inkjet printer. It looked just like a job application at Starbucks. What kind of information do you put on a job application? Anybody here applied for a job lately? You give all of your information. And if you're applying for an overseas job, they want your next of kin contact for emergencies. At the end of the day, Maria was thrilled. She went home. She said, I got the job, Mom. I'm going to leave in 2 weeks. I'm going to send half of the money to you, and half I'm going to save to go to nursing school. On the appointed day, she arrived. She turned over her passport, her visa, all of her legal documents to the travel coordinator. They got on a train that took them to the Black Sea, a ferry across to Turkey, and then they're on the border of Turkey and Greece. And each girl is put in a separate room in a kind of dingy hotel. And Maria told us that she had only had her head on her pillow a few minutes, excited about tomorrow and starting this new life, when 4 men burst in, dressed in uniforms, not necessarily because they were law enforcement, but because this was the beginning of breaking her down. They gang raped her, and the next morning before dawn, she was taken downstairs. The madame duct taped her wrists, her ankles, and her mouth, and she was placed in the false bottom of a little car, an envelope with cash exchanged hands. She was driven across into the border where brothel owners, and prostitution is legal in Greece, were waiting to bid on her, to purchase her. She was taken from town to town, moved around. She never knew where she was. She didn't speak the language. She didn't trust law enforcement. And when she was rescued, she wasn't really rescued. She was deathly ill from sexually transmitted diseases. And the brothel owners are business people, male and female, and they took their sickest girls and put them at a club, and they called the tip in to law enforcement. And 11 girls were brought that night to the shelter. So in Maria's case, she was recruited, she was harbored, she was transported, she was provided. She was recruited through fraud. She was brutalized. And then do you know how they kept her without locking her in a room? They said, remember that job description you filled out? We know where your 8-year-old brother lives, and if you run away or if you jump off the rooftop and commit suicide, that's okay. We know where your brother is, and there's a market for boys in Athens. She was then sold day after day, night after night, for a commercial sex act. And this is the key to trafficking. It's about making money. I prefer to use commercial sexual exploitation instead of just sex trafficking because it gives you the definition. This is a commercial activity. It is designed to make a profit. This crime of human trafficking is a crime of greed. It's a crime of greed, and it works the same way if we're talking about labor trafficking. I don't know how the bean counters do this, but they do these extrapolations, and I have no idea how much $150 billion actually looks like. But that is the guesstimate globally, annually, that this industry generates. So it's about the money. Human trafficking is not a problem in Orange County. That's our local myth. People think it is, and if they think it is a problem, they really think it's not going to be around them. It's not in your community. I have some pictures for you guys that will make you absolutely want to get involved. In Orange County, we started a human trafficking task force back in late 2004. It grew. In 2006, we got some funding. In 2008, we became a federal task force. In 2007, I became the task force administrator. I left that in 2010 to come back to Vanguard. But just recently, every year we make progress. We were able to open last month an emergency shelter for transitional age youth that are victims of commercial sexual exploitation, of sex trafficking, right here in Orange County. Here's a picture of just one series of investigations that happened last year. One was in Stanton, another in Santa Ana. I live in Santa Ana. I know we've rescued a lot of victims from Santa Ana. But here's the thing, it's not just happening in those lower socioeconomic areas, but this shows where it happens in Costa Mesa and Newport Beach, and oh my, right here in Laguna Hills, and down in San Juan Capistrano. Human trafficking happens everywhere. Our 2019 task force report that covered all the stats for the last 2 years was released at a press conference less than a month ago. And in that, you can see who is involved. And here's the thing. We look for lots of different organizations to be part of the task force. So if you don't see your local law enforcement folks, your leaders involved, you are the advocates to get them involved. The task force is composed of law enforcement, victim services, prosecution, and our community. Our community human trafficking task force meeting is the last Wednesday morning of every month, and you're all invited. We have over 400 community volunteers. We probably have more volunteers than any other task force in the US, and we're really proud of that model. Total victims in the last 2 years, 415. Right here in Orange County. The happiest place on earth is in Orange County. We have some of the most beautiful beaches in Orange County. The type of trafficking here is sex trafficking and labor trafficking, and sometimes both. Why do you think that sex trafficking is higher than labor trafficking? When I showed you the myth that labor trafficking is 3 times as prevalent as sex trafficking. This is a class, so you get to answer, right? It's because sex trafficking is easier to find. It is illegal to sell commercial sex. But it is not illegal to wash dishes, wash cars, clean houses, work in a textile factory. And so the labor trafficking is much more difficult to find and more difficult to prosecute. The majority of cases that we've had in Orange County have been domestic servitude, and a few cases where they were involved in car washes or in restaurant or hotel industry. The majority of victims in Orange County are female. Again, if we flip this and we start finding labor trafficking, the numbers will become a little more substantial for male. We also find more adult U.S. victims. They are U.S. citizens that come from situations where they are in financial or in domestic violence situations. 32% of our victims have been minors under the age of 18. Our children are being sold in Orange County. And then foreign adults are almost all female. We've only found a few men, but we do believe that there are more there that we can find. This is one of my favorite resources that you paid for. Did you know that you paid for the Toil and Sweat App? The Department of Labor, funded by your tax dollars, created in 2008, they were mandated to begin to look at what labor trafficking looks like globally in products that end up on your shelves. And so they took that research and created an app called Toil and Sweat. And on that app, you can see that a country and what they produce, and if there was child or forced labor, human trafficking going on. I've done a lot of work in Argentina. When I go to the store and I want to buy fresh blueberries, it says on there where they came from. If they came from Argentina, I know I can look on my Sweat and Toil app and find out that blueberries in Argentina are harvested by children. Children who are not only in forced labor, but by virtue of that, they are not getting an education. And we have universal human rights that declare that children deserve an education. So I've taught this in a lot of different places, and I went back, I was teaching it to social workers in Central California, and I went back a second time, and one of the women came and she said, I've started teaching my 3-year-old how to use this app. So you can teach your grandkids. They'll be fascinated. So she's in the grocery store, and they're about to buy bananas, and she pulls out her phone, pulls up the app, and has her 3-year-old find a picture of bananas. And then they look to see if there's a child being forced to work on that banana plantation. And then they decide, these are from a country where children aren't in school, so we're going to get apples today, or we're going to get grapes from Napa Valley. That doesn't mean there wasn't labor trafficking, because sometimes we have labor trafficking right here in the U.S. in agriculture. But building empathy for labor trafficking victims will increase the ability to identify. Child trafficking looks in a lot of different ways outside of the U.S. Child soldiers, we had a State Department fellow a year ago that spent a semester with us. He grew up as a child soldier in South Sudan. Child trafficking, children being trafficked for commercial sex, and children working in quarries and textile factories. These are the things that are happening in other places. And some of those things end up impacting your community, either in the products on your shelves or because of sex tourism, which is a huge crime that is punishable here in the U.S., even though it happens in another country. This is just a beautiful global look at the numbers of labor trafficking, and you can see how much the numbers are higher in Asia and Africa than they are here in the West. But we are dedicated to figuring out how that impacts us, because the West drives most of the consumerism for the products being produced in those other countries. So it's not a one-way picture. So one of the activities that we do with students and at high schools and things, there's another app program on your computer, and if you want to do this with your kids, you can write this down. Greg can send you this PowerPoint, slaveryfootprint.org. And you get to choose all the things that you use in your lifestyle, and it will actually compute how many slaves work for you. The way I did this in my class before we had this app is I asked the biggest, most popular sports athlete in the room where he got his great polo shirt or his beautiful sweater, and did he pay for it? And he'll usually say, yes, I paid for it, or my mom paid for it. And then I ask who got paid. And you start figuring out that and you find out the price, and maybe they got it for $19. Who got paid for picking the cotton? Who got paid for cutting out the fabric? Who got paid for sewing the fabric? Who got paid for transporting it? Who got paid for putting it on the shelves? And you begin to realize that somebody didn't get paid when the price is so cheap. So we have to start thinking through the logic. If it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. And our commitment to human dignity is why we teach our students how to do fair trade and supply chain transparency. The Supply Chain Transparency Act in California was passed in 2010. It doesn't have a lot of teeth, but it does give you the right to ask a retailer where the product comes from. What has your supply chain officer done to make sure that slaves are not part of what I'm purchasing? Because I don't want to drive demand for slave-made products. One of the cases here in Orange County, how many of you know of this case in Irvine? 2002, Shima Hall was rescued as a domestic child made in a gated $1.6 million home in Irvine. She had never seen a doctor. She had never seen a dentist. She didn't speak English. Victim Services was just kind of gearing up, working with her, learning trauma-informed approaches. It took 2 years before they were able to actually start investigating because she could tell her story. Now, she's actually written a book called Hidden Girl, to talk about child slavery. It's on the Scholastic book list. I want all of you to buy this for your grandkids, but read it first before you give it to them. I think it's $10 on Amazon. The reason this is so important is because what drives awareness in the Western world are sex trafficking documentaries, and people aren't looking for victims of human trafficking that are in domestic servitude. This little girl was rescued because a neighbor girl noticed that there was a girl close to her age who didn't go to school. And when she went to that house where there were 5 children that Shima took care of, when she went to that house, Shima did the dishes. She cooked, she did everything. She didn't play with the other kids. So this little girl told her mom, told her dad. They called Irvine Police Department, who came out and did a welfare check and discovered that here was a little girl. They didn't know what the situation was, but they came back with child welfare and took her out of the home. Now, Shima didn't tell her story because she was petrified. She said that when the police came and took her out, the parents in the home, the traffickers, had told her that if you ever tell, they'll come and get you, put you in a police car, and you'll never see your family again. And so when we rescued her, guess what we did? We came with a black and white police car, we took her out and put her in the back of a car and handed her a phone with somebody talking to her in Arabic saying, "Don't worry, don't be afraid." Would you be worried? Would you be afraid? Shima is now happily married, has 2 beautiful children, is a U.S. citizen, and this book teaches empathy for labor trafficking victims. By the way, she was on Dr. Oz on March 7th telling her story. So if you recorded that, what do we call that? DVR, whatever? Yeah, there you go. You can choose fair trade products if you don't want to go and do supply chain transparency. So you can be part of the movement for purchasing that is socially responsible and ethical. Again, see, I put this in here twice, repetition, that's how we learn things. If you were thinking, oh, I wish I'd written that down before, now write it down, the Toil and Sweat app. It has over 8,000 pages of research at your fingertips. So it's well worth it. We use our student mobilization team at Vanguard, it's called Live to Free, to go into our schools, especially in more vulnerable areas where we know that recruiting is happening, either on the sidewalks or sometimes even in the schools. And we teach our youth the risks of runaway recruitment, of lover boy, pimp recruiting, of being recruited so you can help your family, gangs that are actually involved in human trafficking, how to keep your kids safe from internet predators, recruiting for traveling sales crews. This is more and more prevalent. It's a labor trafficking, peer recruiting. So we're going to talk about each of these briefly because these are the cases that we've had here in Orange County. So the traveling sales crews, you'll see these kind of jobs posted. You'll see kids coming to your door offering you magazines. What should you do if that happens? I think because you're in a gated community, it doesn't happen here. They don't let them in. But you might have friends and neighbors. I'm going to give you an 888 number for you to use before the end of this. One of the things that absolutely is so frustrating is how do we protect our youth when they are already being victimized? So this is a story of a woman who is now in college. She's doing really well, so I don't want you to feel traumatized, but her story is a great example of how this happens. Anna was 14, being raised by a single mom, and her mom was professional. They did really well. And then her mom met a guy and fell in love. And she, sorry about that. I think I hit the mute button. Yep, there I go. So Anna's mom let her new boyfriend move in with them. Within a week, this guy molested Anna. Child welfare came, took her out of the home. They have to do the investigation before she can be returned. And then they put her in a youth shelter. And she didn't like the youth shelter. I don't think anybody really likes a youth shelter. And she's 14. And 14-year-olds don't really like a lot. Anybody remember when your kids were 14? They complain about everything. So our shelters are secure. You can't get in, but they can leave, and we are not legally allowed to restrain them. So Anna left the shelter. She didn't like it there. She could take care of herself. She's 14 years old. But she didn't think it all through, so she ends up on a park bench, 1 o'clock in the morning. And when she told me this part of her story, I went home and told my husband, this guy has a degree in psychology. So here's what happened. She's trying to pretend like she's sleeping on the park bench, and the guy stops. He goes 3 places when he wants to recruit new product. He goes to the parks, to the mall, and to the bus station. So he stops at the fast food place, picks up a $1 menu hamburger, and he goes to the park. And when he sees her on the bench, he goes into his routine. And he walks past her first. And then he throws his arms up and he goes, "Oh, are you okay?" And she's 14, so she knows to be afraid of, oh, you guys, you got to be better than that. Thank you. She knows to be afraid of strangers, so she just pretends like she doesn't see him. So he starts to take a few steps, but then he stops and he holds up the hamburger and he says, "You know, I just got this hamburger and I'm not really that hungry. It's still hot. If you're hungry, you can have it." Well, she is hungry. She didn't think this all through, what running away would mean. She sits up, he goes back and sits down next to her on the bench. And now he's positioning himself to be her caretaker. And we are hardwired to have a caretaker. She sat down, he sat down on the bench with her, gave her the hamburger. While she's eating, he's asking her questions. She thinks he's really interested. He's collecting data for how to manipulate her. She thinks he really cares. He's developing a connection. So when she's done, he even takes the trash because he's her caretaker. "I'll take care of that." And he grabs it and he walks all the way over to the trash can. And then he starts to leave. And then he turns back and he says, "I don't think it's safe for you out here." Long pause. And he says, "You know," and he starts to slowly walk back. He doesn't want her to be afraid. "It might be better for you to come and sleep on my couch tonight, and we'll figure out what to do tomorrow." Okay, is he still a stranger? Not for her. He's a friend. He fed her. He cares about her safety. He knows her story, and he understands. Nobody else understands her. So she gets up and goes home with him, and she does indeed sleep on the couch that night. The next day, though, they don't go call child welfare or her mother. They go to the mall, and he buys her some really hot new clothes. And by the end of the week, he's telling her she's beautiful, and he's falling in love with her. And now he's 26, and she's 14. Now he's telling her that he loves her, and they're now going to be in a relationship. By the end of the second week, he tells her, we've got to make some money, and I know you love me. And she goes, "I love you, baby." And then he says, "Here's what we're going to do to make some money." And he sends her out for her first date, selling her for sex. At the end of the third week, she comes back without working very much and didn't bring enough money, so he locks her out and says, "You have to bring $1,000 to get back in." And then she found out there are 3 other girls in his stable. But here's what he told her. When you're 18, I'm going to marry you. I love you. And this is our business, and we're making money so we can buy our house and start a family. Now, you and I know he isn't going to marry her, right? How many years can he keep telling her that lie? Good mathematicians in this room. Good. So your brain is not, if there are any doctors, anybody in the room, I know your brain is not this color. I'm a nurse. But I want to talk just briefly about why our kids are so vulnerable. Because at 14, 15, 16, the green part, the limbic system, is highly developed. It's very reward-centered. It's very emotional. It's very labile. The prefrontal cortex, where executive decision-making is housed, where risk management is housed, is just a really thin little sliver here right now. And so you and I, we understand risk management. Risk management happens for me in my neighborhood because there's a train that can hold me up 7 minutes on my way to work if I miss that left turn. So if I'm going along and I can see that the light is yellow, I have to make a decision. Am I going to go through a yellow-orange light, or am I going to stop? Now, there are two things that immediately I know I'm going to stop. If there is an 18-wheeler coming from the other direction, or a black and white car. But I can make that decision. I have good risk management skills. Anna didn't have good risk management skills. So how do we begin to protect young people like that from predators who have studied Maslow's hierarchy? What did he give her first? A hamburger. He fed her. Then he offered her a place to sleep. Girls who sleep outside know they risk getting raped. And then he started telling her how beautiful she was, how much he loved her. And then this self-actualization, you're in this business with me. This is so we can have a home. Now, you think that's really a stretch? I didn't come up with this. This was in an article written by R.J. Martin, a pimp, How to Be a Pimp Using Maslow's Hierarchy of Human Need to Make the Most Money. Are you outraged? We should be doing this for our kids. Instead, recruiters are using the same model to recruit our kids. Other ways that they recruit in Santa Ana, I talked to a school psychologist who said that the pimps were waiting outside a couple blocks from school and would approach girls on their way home from school saying, I know your family's struggling. Santa Ana High School is in the lowest economic zip code in Orange County. Yeah, we'll show you how to make an extra $100 a week, and you won't miss any school. Gangs. I hope you have a presentation on gangs in Orange County. It's huge. Internet predators. I want to talk about how to keep your kids safe from internet predators. 80% of recruiting now happens online. And not just in those wacko social media accounts that you've never heard of, but right there on Facebook and Instagram. So this is an Orange County case that happened a few years ago. This guy, this is the picture from his social media account. Would you trust him with anything? See, I want you to go back and think about this brain, all right? So he is not selling anything to you. He's selling something to a 14 or 15-year-old girl living in a shelter that wants out. So on his social media, he has this picture. He shows that he's successful, and he makes friends and says, you're beautiful. I'm an agent. You can start in modeling, and then you'll become a star. And then he sends them a bus ticket. One of the girls that came to Orange County when he recruited her on social media, oh, and he showed her all the money, too, that's in his social media profile, was all the way from Florida. And as soon as she arrived, he started posting her pictures online and selling her. Recruiters are not just, don't look just like this. This is why we have to be so much smarter. They look like this. Both of these girls were high school students who started their own recruiting business, started their own pimping and pandering, their own commercial sexual exploitation of children, of minors. One was a cheerleader, the other was one part of the intellectual club at a school in Colorado. So what we do with Live to Free, we go into these schools and we talk about these stories. And then, because kids, if you tell your kids not to do something, they do, yeah, you're laughing already. Yeah, save your breath. They roll their eyes, or they say, you don't trust me, or you don't understand, or better, Sally's mom lets her go to the mall. Yeah, so we use a different model that's called anticipatory guidance that's based, oh, I did it again? Okay. It's searching. We use the anticipatory guidance model that's based on the idea that if I talk to you about your friends instead of about you, that you're going to take that in because, see, while you think you're too smart to fall for this, you don't think your friend Dan is. Yeah. So if you know these signs, you will be able to protect your community. So we call two friends that are really good friends up, and we give them one of these scenarios, and then we ask them, what will you do? What will you do to make your community safe? So give it a second. Don't touch anything, right? Okay, don't touch anything. I'm wanting to touch anything. So our Live to Free team, right now, they're in Orange County at the Bridges High School Leadership Conference that has 500 leaders from across Orange County, and Live to Free team is presenting 3 times this morning for their conference, and this is their 10th year to do this because we believe we have to do peer-to-peer, youth-led empowerment in the schools. Live to Free believes in dignity of the individual, and they also try to, I'm trying to figure out what I should do next, and Dan is going to fix it. That's good. I'll move my water so he doesn't click it. And I didn't bring my notes up because I had this, so I'm not sure what comes next, but that's okay. I'm going to give you a number that you can write down, memorize, put it in your cell phone, and it's the number you can call to report something that you see. You might see domestic servitude. You might see people working in a massage parlor that are also sleeping in the massage parlor. You might see people who are at the same location and never have a day off. There was an elder care facility in Long Beach where the owners actually ordered 6 young people from the Philippines, kind of like you'd order pizza. And they paid $6,000 each, and those kids thought they were coming here to perform in a martial arts summer program. Instead, they became slaves at an elder care facility. They worked 24/7. They ate what was left over by the residents, and they slept in the closet, on a couch, or on a piece of carpet. They were rescued because one of the neighbors, residential elder care facility, one of the neighbors said to one of the girls, it looks like you never get a day off. And he was just making conversation. Nice retired guy. And she got scared, dropped the hose where she was watering the flowers, and ran inside because she had been threatened that if you told anybody, they would file charges that you'd stolen something and you'd go to prison and you'd never get home. That's right here in California. So this is the number, 888-373-7888. And one of the things that we really want to encourage is that we start teaching our young people really early. I'm watching the time. We're doing really, really well. Okay. So did everybody get this down? 888-37-37-888. This is a hotline that is not law enforcement. It's supported by our Health and Human Services and run by Polaris out in Washington, D.C. They have access to like 300 languages. They have 3 full-time people speaking the most common languages here. And they will then roll this out to the appropriate community, law enforcement, and victim services to follow up to investigate. And you can also call this number if you just have a question and you think you should report something. This is our current Live to Free team. I'm so proud of them. This is just 2 weeks ago at our Ensure Justice conference. And the reason I have this up is because I'm going to show you a video in just a couple minutes that this team helped put together. At Ensure Justice, the ambassador at large on combating human trafficking for our U.S. State Department, John Richmond, was there, and these kids had an opportunity to learn about policy and advocacy and take that to the next level. The Orange County superintendent of our Department of Education, we're partnering with them to reach into our schools. And our Live to Free coach from Vanguard, Ruthie, is absolutely amazing. This is the quality of kids that you'll get if you want to have Live to Free come to your schools. They do this for free, there's no charge. They just want to practice their outreach skills, their advocacy. And our Live to Free students eventually become law enforcement, homeland security, child welfare, CSEC coordinators, juvenile probation. They become leaders in fighting human trafficking. So if you want someone to come to your kid's school, this is the email address. So this year, our Live to Free embedded at Valley High School, which is in Santa Ana. We already know of cases at Valley High. We discovered possible cases while the students were there. And they worked and empowered the students. They didn't do this themselves. They supported Valley High School students who created a project to make their high school the first anti-trafficking school in Orange County. One of the projects was to produce a video, and I've been told I need to click on the video here, not from the clicker. So I want you to see what high school kids did. Sound. So this was written by these high school students and acted.
So what are you gonna do at the party today?
I don't know, I think I might be with my mans.
That's good. See you at the party.
Alright, late.
All right, bye.
Hey,
Hi.
you look gorgeous.
Babe, stop. It's because of the party. Remember you told me to look sexy?
I remember. Because tonight, I'm going to show you off to all my homies. And they're going to love you the way I do.
Alright, well, I'll see you after school, okay?
All right then.
Meet me by the lockers.
All right. Another thing, don't be late.
I won't.
You're great. Let's go inside.
I don't know, like, I've been texting Stony and, like, I don't know if she's here or not. And I just feel weird.
Look, it's gonna be fine. No one's gonna mess with you because you're with me. Trust me.
Okay.
It's gonna be fine. All right, let's go. We're gonna stare at you, all right?
Okay.
Hey, lovebirds.
You're here?
Yeah?
I've been texting you.
Well, I'm here now, ain't I?
Come here, girl.
All right, we'll go talk with your guy.
All right, go ahead.
So, get her a drink.
Of course I will.
Babe. This is Hector. He's a business partner. He's gonna help us make us hella money, right? Okay. Irene.
Carlos, let me talk to your girl alone. I got this proposition for you. All you gotta do is go with this guy. He thinks you're really pretty. At the end, I'll give your man $350.
Wait, what? But Carlos is my boyfriend. And I thought he was your business partner.
Mi amor, eso es nuestro futuro. Our future. You and me.
It's not cheating if he wants you to do it.
I don't know. I'll see what's up.
I'll show you what's up. You're gonna go into that room, take care of business for me, or else I'm gonna collect from Carlos. I don't think you want that to happen. Your man said you're already gonna do it. I'm gonna go settle things with your man.
No. Stop. If it's for him and us, I'll do it.
He's over there. Go talk to him.
I never knew my life would end up this way. About how one man can change your entire life. He convinced me that if I loved him, I would do it for him. For us. It's not your fault. Many girls like Irene have been tricked into the sex industry thinking their boyfriend loves them when he's only using her to make money. Many of them don't have a choice. If you or a friend need help to get out of this situation, please call the Human Trafficking Hotline, 888-3737-888, or text to the number, Be Free. We want you to know that there is hope. Even when you feel like everything is going wrong, believe that your life can change.
Okay, so making an impact right here in Orange County to protect our own kids, we need to be empowering the youth in our schools, and that's what we're doing. We also need to learn to report what we see, and this idea of looking beneath the surface. So it's really easy to find sex trafficking because it's illegal. It's not illegal to wash dishes, but do we know why the guy is there every day washing dishes? Why isn't he working part-time and going to Saddleback College to get a degree to move up? These are the kinds of things we have to be looking at around modern-day slavery. And we need to start figuring out why people are victims. So many times we focused our resources on rescue and training law enforcement, but how can we do prevention? My background is pediatric nursing. My first victim of human trafficking was a 14-year-old boy whose mother and stepfather were selling him for their drugs. And he was admitted at 2 a.m. on my night shift at the hospital. So asking how they got there. What were the risk factors? We know right now in Orange County that if someone in your family has an addiction issue, you're more likely to be a victim of child abuse and neglect. And we know that if you are a victim of child abuse and neglect, your risk for being trafficked increases. Either because you're trying to get away from something and you run away like Anna did, or you find yourself in really compromising situations. They take you out of your home, and then that makes you more vulnerable to people like the guy in the red suit, who was not Santa Claus, right? Okay, so in a public health model, any public health experts in the room? Because I made this really, really simple. In a public health model, you want to find out what the problem is. You have to be able to predict what causes a particular problem. So, what's going to happen if this kid eats lollipops every day? Okay, so did somebody say dental caries? Yeah, cavities. So we know that they'll get cavities. So we try to predict what the problem is, and then we try to create a way to protect them from this problem. So one of the things that we could do is take the lollipops away. I did that. I did not give my children any sugar. I wanted them to have beautiful teeth. And then I took them to Grandma and Grandpa's house. And that was all over. They had candy by the TV. They had candy on the dining room table. And what can you do? Grandparents, this is definitely an issue. So we came up with a better way to protect from cavities. Brush your teeth, right? So how old was your kid when you first started teaching them to brush their teeth? 2, 1? I mean, they start really, really young. And you show them one time, and then you tell them you have to do this twice a day, right? Is that what we do? No. We tell them every time they finish a meal, when they walk out the door to go to school. I was in high school and my mother still asked me, did you brush your teeth? Did you brush your teeth? Because we come up with a strategy to protect, but we have to practice, practice, practice. And the problem with prevention, and we have a a California law that requires human trafficking prevention teaching once in middle school and once in high school. Okay, so I actually want to go to Sacramento with a wheelbarrow full of toothbrushes, give them out to all of these legislators who pass these well-meaning laws, and tell them that you get to brush your teeth this week and again in 2 years. Because that's what that amounts to. If we want to prevent our youth being victimized, we have to do prevention that is practice, practice, practice. It's like brushing your teeth. We teach our kids, and it can start when you're buying bananas at the grocery store using that app. That's a way to start teaching that slavery exists, and we can be part of the solution, raising that awareness and making this part of how we raise our kids, that we respect human dignity and we're not going to allow anyone to be sold. This is especially significant when you remember what I said about recruiting 80% online. How many of your kids have laptops in their rooms? How many of your kids are not supervised on their phones? You never check their phones. This is an area that, just like you ask your kids, did you brush your teeth? I have a daughter with some teenage kids, and she tells them, your phone is not a right, it is a privilege. And whenever I want to look at it, I get to look at it. I need to know all your passwords. That's what parenting is about. She checks their phones regularly. This is an important parental responsibility. There are things that we can do to make sure that kids are safe from the time they're very small. This is an example of some online training that is not scary for kids. It's developed at their age level, and this is a game, Clicky's Quest. How many of your grandkids play internet games? They might as well play one that is educational and that's like brushing their teeth. So they can do it all the time. And they come up with new ones all the time. This is a way to practice internet safety. Just telling them, don't do this and don't do that, is pretty much like the risk management thing. They're not going to get it. Their brains aren't done. So we have to work on this and be smarter. So this is the website, NetSmarts, and they provide resources. Again, these are free resources, but actually they were paid for by you. So it's smart to use what you bought, right? This is paid for with tax dollars. The FBI, it's a public-private partnership with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And the materials on this website are available for parents, for educators, and these materials can be used in the classroom and they're already graded what level, law enforcement training, teens and tweens, and younger kids. Absolutely amazing. I'm personally very concerned about how much younger and younger a child average age of introduction to pornography is. They have a 7-minute video that's amazing on how to. I didn't touch anything, and it went away. Okay. We'll just keep going. Free resources. Oh, there it is. I'm not going to touch this anymore. These resources are free, and I encourage you to learn how to equip your kids to make their kids safe, kids in your community. I also, if your curiosity is piqued today, I want you to look at better, more in-depth training on actual legal terminology. This is my favorite. It's from the Blue Campaign. Again, this is it takes about 30 minutes. I love it because it has a quiz. Teachers love quizzes. And so it won't let you go to the next section until you pass the quiz. This is wonderful. This is great. I produce and have since 2011 the Ending Human Trafficking podcast that Greg mentioned earlier. We want our community to be educated, to know what to do when you see something, because we're not going to start finding the labor trafficking cases that we know we have in Orange County, in California, in the US, unless we have people who know what to do when they see something that isn't right. So study the issues, be a voice, make a difference. We also try to educate people on best practice. Many of us are involved in efforts that address human trafficking in other countries. This last week, we released an episode where we interviewed a member of the U.S. State Department and their investigation into child trafficking in orphanages around the world. If you support a child support program, an orphanage, you need to listen to that podcast to find out how you can make sure that your money isn't actually being diverted. In one instance, in Thailand, well, in several instances, it's been declared a cottage industry. They go out into the countryside and rent children for the orphanage so that when your tour group comes, so it's called trafficking tourism. When your tour group comes, you get to come and visit the kids in the orphanage, and they're just taking your money. They raise money. These are issues around trafficking that we hadn't thought of. We just watched the video, and the police showed up and rescued 12 girls in a container at Long Beach. But everything is much more integrated in your community, and you need to be able to identify it and know how to respond. These are just some examples of podcasts. Homeless youth risk, the challenge of substance abuse, and talking about all the issues that are involved in anti-trafficking. One of my friends, Dee Dee Pujols, her husband, how many of you know who Albert Pujols is? first baseman, right? Huh? Yeah. And so they started strikeout slavery. So September 14th, 2019, you can go to the Angels game, and the Angels, a sports facility, will have a dedicated game to bringing awareness about human trafficking in your community. We need more leaders that are not just academics who talk in lectures, but out there on the main stage to educate our community so that they know what to do when they see something. The assistant director of Global Center for Women and Justice recently was the 3-year labor trafficking expert for the U.S. Bureau of Justice Assistance, and he gave me this slide to show us our progress since we started tracking human trafficking cases federally. We passed the law in 2000. So we are doing a much better job. I love it when it goes up like that. But there is so much more we can do globally. According to some statistics, 93% of human trafficking happens in the third world, in the developing world. And so the Trafficking in Persons report also looks at global estimates. And you can see these are just some snapshots so that you can see we're making progress. Every year we're identifying more cases, we're prosecuting more cases, and one of the best things that happens because of our State Department efforts is we are seeing new laws passed because legislation gives the community teeth to fight human trafficking. I keep coming back to children in trafficking, and just circled a few numbers here of children at 5 to 14 years of age, boys being trafficked, girls being trafficked. And it's important for us to understand that this is the future, and these kids don't turn 18 and walk away. They are usually enslaved for life. The girls may start out working in the fields, and then they become victims of both labor trafficking and sex trafficking. I think this is my 3rd time to have this slide. Has anybody counted? I want you to be socially responsible, ethical consumers. Ask questions. You live in the only state in the country with a Supply Chain Transparency Act, and the only way that's going to get more teeth in it is if we advocate for that, if we ask our legislators to beef it up, to make more procurement offices at major corporations, at places like this, at churches. I just interviewed a gentleman from Australia who has created a Sydney framework. He happens to be part of the Catholic Church, and every parish in their community has a training for their procurement department how to do supply chain transparency. How to do supply chain transparency. Some of the reports that I drew information from came from our annual TIP report that is produced by our State Department, the Attorney General's report to Congress. These are places, do they have to do homework for this? Yeah? Okay. Because usually when I teach this to students, they have to look at this and respond to by writing a paper. So Polaris, I mentioned them, Urban Institute, Northeastern, and Aquitas. OVC is the Office for Victims of Crime. CAST LA has the best legal framework in Orange County. And then OVC, DOJ, and BJA are the people that put together the task forces. And right now there are 36 task forces across the U.S. Orange County is one of the top 2 or 3, according to the evaluators. So I got nervous when the technology was going awry, and so I actually sped through a couple of my slides. So I think I want to open this to questions right now so we can have a little longer conversation, because I want to know what you want to know.
Say thank you to Dr. Morgan. I appreciate it so much, the application. Lots of things we can do. Phone numbers to call, websites, podcasts, things to do where you can get more involved, get more engaged and become more informed, but also get involved. Look around, know what you're looking for. So thank you very much. Very informative time together. We're going to have some time for questions and answers. I see a question at the very top. Let me take you for the first. Go ahead. Is it working?
Yes. In working with law enforcement, have you ever broached the issue, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but have you ever broached the issue with the Orange County Police of running an operation to infiltrate these groups?
Yes, and actually, because I was the administrator of a federal task force, I actually learned that our local police, our sheriff's department, and our federal agencies often partner on those kinds of long-term investigations. In fact, I can tell you a couple of amusing but very telling stories. I was the task force administrator, and I received a call from instructions from the FBI to go to a particular college and tell the students who were somehow being trained to go do investigations in local brothels. It was not at my university. And tell them that if they were back in that same illegal massage parlor the next weekend, they would be arrested and mommy and daddy would not be able to get them out. I'm direct quotes of jail, because they were blowing up an investigation that was an expensive partnership. And so I went to the school to tell them and talk to leaders, but I went back to my school and realized that I would have the same risk if somebody came in and told these kids that they could go do investigation, which is why we began to develop our student mobilization team that would go towards a prevention-based effort. I also know that there are organizations that pride themselves on going out and doing their own investigations. And as the administrator of the task force, I was very challenged and chagrined. How do we teach the community that this is not the way to do it? Call the number so that we then have evidence that we can use to prosecute. You can't use evidence that was collected without due process. And many times, organizations would do they called the news, CBS showed up at one, and they rescued a girl. They didn't catch the trafficker. They put her face on the news, and then she was at risk because we didn't catch the trafficker. So our social services and victim services had to move her to a safe and unknown location out of state to protect her. So our law enforcement worked together really well.
Well, thank you for your work. It takes a lot of dedication.
Thank you.
Yeah, right down here, sure.
Thank you very
Can
you hear me?
Is the mic on? Yeah, just like, we'll get the mic going in a second. Sorry for the technical difficulties today. Try it again.
Okay, can you hear me?
No?
No, we're going to give you a new mic.
We're
I
giving
can
you a
hear
new
you,
mic.
but
There's
they
a new mic
can't.
coming down to you.
This is one of our early Price is Right winners.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very informative and insightful. Just a comment, and going and searching for the free app, Sweat and Toil. It's not titled that way.
Oh, what is it?
Excuse me, you have Toil and Sweat. It's Sweat and Toil.
Sweat and Toil?
Yes.
I got it backwards?
Yes.
I'm mildly dyslexic and blind in my left eye. Thank you. Sweat and Toil. Sweat and Toil. You've already downloaded it?
Yes, I have.
If I had prizes to give away, I would give you a prize. Anybody else already found it? Oh, good for you. What a great class.
I know.
I would come back and teach this class.
By the way, as you came in, you got a card, or I don't know if there's any more left, just to give the website and how to get more information about,
The
what's
podcast,
yeah, what's
endinghumantrafficking.org. And if you go on your computer, you can subscribe, and at the same time, you'll get a free ebook about 5 things you need to know, kind of a quick start guide for your community for ending human trafficking. The podcast has weekly show notes, or bi-monthly actually, and everything we talk about, we put the links in there so you can access it yourself. I just want people to be educated.
We've got a question up at the very top over there. Go ahead. Except for the mic's not working. Here it comes. Here it comes.
This is both a comment and a question. In the March 8th issue of the Week magazine, there's a paragraph here. For rich men, sexploitation is no crime. And they cite Palm Beach resident Jeffrey Epstein, who held 36 teenage girls in his mansion. Ken Starr and Alan Dershowitz got the plea down to one count, and he got 13 months, but he went to work every day. My question is, what is being done to educate attorneys and judges who do not consider this other than the good old boys network?
Thank you very much for that question. Okay, so I'm supposed to be focused on Orange County, so I'm going to talk about Orange County, and then nationally, and then internationally. So in Orange County, we have over 300 convictions of sex traffickers. Some of them have extended to 25 years to life. That's the level of work that they've done. We've also been the first task force in the US, or one of the very few, that have prosecuted sex trafficking cases successfully without testimony from the victim. Because one of the challenges is victims in our judicial system must face their perpetrator. And this can be absolutely overwhelming for post-traumatic stress disorder, especially when there's been so much brutalization, as you can imagine. So our district attorney's office has the HEAT unit, which is Human Exploitation and Trafficking. It's been going for 5 to 6 years, and it took a little bit getting it warmed up, but now they had 85 convictions last year. So every year they have a really solid conviction rate. We also have federal cases, and sex trafficking is part of that, as well as there are more sex trafficking convictions than there are labor trafficking cases, and that's because it's much harder, the burden of proof, because of the labor isn't illegal like sex is illegal. We also have internationally, in that Trafficking in Persons report, you can see how a country is doing in prosecutions. And we have a tier 1, 2, and 3. Tier 3, they haven't done anything. Tier 2, they've passed a law. If they've only passed a law and they're not actually enforcing it, they're tier 2 watch list. Tier 1, they've passed a law and they're prosecuting cases. So if you're planning a trip to Italy,
Yes.
you could look up Italy in the TIP report and find out what kinds of trafficking to look for, what their record is, and what kind of efforts are being done. And I know, I've studied Italy, I've taken my students on study abroad, and I know that they traffic women from China into brick tile making, into textile factories. They traffic women from Nigeria into sex trafficking. They traffic Southeastern women into sex trafficking, and they traffic women from, boys particularly, from Brazil. So And you can actually look up and find the hotline number while you're there, after you get engaged.
After I get engaged,
But I'm
hopefully.
deputizing him now.
Okay, thank you,
Yes.
thank you. But, yeah, I mean, I've seen there's a question back. I have a question for you, and it's just maybe my naivety. We see a dishwasher, a boy working in a dishwasher here. Why can't he just walk away? What's the pull that's keeping a boy in labor?
So in labor trafficking, the coercion part is sometimes more complicated to be able to see, but they are often in debt bondage. One case here in Southern California years ago, and this is one of the weird things that at least I thought it was weird at first, is that the traffickers are often from the same village. That just boggles my mind. And so they prey on people with problems, with issues, having no job, whatever. In this particular case, his little boy needed medication he couldn't afford. So somebody said, there's a job, you can come and we'll give you the coyote money, the smuggling money, and then you can pay us back and send money home for medication. Well, when he got here, if he had paid the smuggler and when they got to the border, he was free and could go do what he wanted, that wouldn't be human trafficking. That would be a crime against the state, the crime against the border. That would be smuggling. But human trafficking, the smuggling appearance was part of the coercion and the fraud that got him here. And now he owes a debt to pay back. And he gets to the place where he's working. Maybe it's a construction site or a restaurant or a hotel. And at the end of the first week, they all line up to get their pay. And there's a book. They keep good records, traffickers do. And everybody's lined up and there's cash on the table. And so there you're looking at the cash and you're thinking, what a good decision I made. And then they say, okay, this is what you owe for your housing, for your transportation, for your food, and that little plastic Bic razor, that was $2. And by the time they're finished, you've got a $20 bill. And what you realize the third week that you owe more money than when you arrived because of interest, and you're trapped. And you don't say, I'm going to call the Human Trafficking Task Force. Here's what he said. I was so stupid. It's my own fault. And so they don't know anybody will help them. We can ask one more question. And I was in a nail salon years and years ago. And I asked the girl how to say her name because her badge said Ellen. And she said, oh, I use this name because people can't pronounce my name. Americans can't say my name. I was like, try me. I speak German and Spanish and Greek. I'd love to learn how to say your name. So she taught me how to say her name. You see, personal dignity is the key. Seeing an individual, looking beneath the surface. I learned she wasn't happy in her job, and I was like, well, why don't you change jobs? Well, I can't. This is my husband's family business. My family sent me here. She was purchased as a bride through a catalog broker. And she worked in the nail salon, and she worked in a factory. I left there and tried to get help. It was before we had a task force. I was just visiting. I went back to Greece. But my daughter kept going back trying to find Ellen. And they had moved her because they saw her talking to me. And we never found a way to get her out.
All this presumes human dignity, that each human has dignity. That's one of the things it's amazing. Go ahead, back here.
Hello. What are the volunteer opportunities that you have?
Oh, we have fabulous volunteer opportunities, the task force of which Vanguard University is a member. We have events sometimes where we ask for task force volunteers. There are volunteer opportunities to do things at the OC Fair. And for people who want to be very, very involved and go through the training, We have volunteer opportunities to drive survivors to DMV appointments, to doctor's appointments, to teach English as a second language, lots of different mentoring opportunities.
And where are you located?
The Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force is located right off of the 55 on Dyer Road, and their meeting is the last Wednesday of every month at 10:30.
Okay. And Dr. Jenks, do we get to meet your fiance?
She's coming May 23rd, the day after school's out. If you want to have a party, I'm thinking of having a party for everybody who wants to come and meet her. Right over here.
Yes, Dr. Morgan, is there any source, website or otherwise, where one can review the agencies that may be involved in young people? My granddaughter, 14-year-old granddaughter, looks forward to trying to get to Fiji with friends for an adventure program this summer. And we need to check out the agency that's going, supporting this situation. Can you recommend or know of any?
Oh, that is a brilliant question. I do a lot of research on all the nonprofits. There's like 3,000, and some of them are not as good as others. But agencies, I definitely do encourage. When I send students, I always do background checks and that sort of thing on the organization that they're going to. So I don't have a good answer for that. There's not a central clearinghouse. Is she going through her university? Oh, she's 14. Okay. Probably you should ask the high school how they vetted it and what kind of safeguards are in place, because I have heard some really difficult stories, and it would be very important for the high school to have vetted it. So that's what I would do. I'd start there.
Yeah. One more question right here.
At the street corner, we see these homeless people, and is there any connection between human trafficking and those guys?
Wow, that is absolutely true. Homelessness and human trafficking, especially when we're talking about youth and young adults. And when sometimes they have been in foster services and they're aging out and they're desperate, and somebody knows that, so they offer them a job or they offer them a place to stay. Other times it's like the Anna story. They recruit them by finding them sleeping in the park or in their car or on the beach, and they offer them a place to stay. Homelessness is a huge risk factor for being recruited. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children estimates that 1 out of every 7 runaways is a likely trafficking victim.
Well, thank you, Dr. Morgan. I'm just thinking about a lot of things. I'm thinking about going to Italy. You know, when you travel, you think, oh, you see a lot of things that people don't necessarily see. Go ahead.
Can I just tell you one more big risk factor in our world today?
Yeah.
Refugees who were unable to find a place and are now basically homeless, countryless. They are the easiest trafficking victims to recruit.
So when you think internationally, you think, oh, that's happening over there. One thing I think we're very aware of now, that it happens on our doorstep. And you think of Santa Ana, it's all happening in Santa Ana, but it's happening everywhere. And we just need to be aware of it. We need to be aware of it. And what's the number? 888-3737-888. Easy number to remember, right?
Yeah.
So that's something to always keep in mind. If you see something a little suspicious, to call and say, I think something looks suspicious here, and that's good. All right, well, thank you so much for coming. Remember, thank you, Dr. Morgan, very much. One thing about Dr. Morgan, she's on the front lines of fighting this with a lot of other people. There's a lot of people that are trying to stop a very, it's all about economics, finances, right? It's greed. So pornography, it's a lot of things where it comes right into our world, and we need to be aware of the financial incentive and cut it off there. We're not meeting next week. We're not meeting the week after. When I come back, I'm going to be an engaged man. I'm looking forward to that. And I'll be an older man. Well, I'm already older. It's over. I'm 58. It's done. All right. We'll see you in a few weeks. Thank you so much for coming. Bye-bye now. Thank you so much.
Good.
It was very informative. I love the applications all the way through it. It was very well done.